A big welcome from the International Water Resources Association to our World Toilet Day webinar. We thank you for joining us today. My name is Lindsay Blodgett, and I am a IWRA webinar officer. So thank you again for being here. Our panelists today include Michael Campana, who's a professor of hydrology and water resources management at Oregon State University, Amanda Lofin, who's the CEO at Human Right to Water, and Michelle Frem, the chair of UNESCO Groundwater Youth Network. This webinar will be hosted by the IWRA. We are an international network of researchers and practitioners who work on a multidisciplinary range of water resources issues. It provides a global knowledge-based forum for bridging disciplines and geographies by connecting professionals, students, individuals, corporations, and institutions who are concerned with the sustainable use of our world's water. The theme of today's webinar will be based off of the World Toilet Day titled "Don't Waste Time Managing Sanitation Systems to Protect Groundwater." Groundwater, as we know, is an essential water resource globally, and the strong need for improved sanitation systems around the world has had a real impact on groundwater. This webinar will help the audience to learn about the impact of latrine systems on groundwater, draw connections between the human right to water, groundwater, and sanitation, and will also inform the audience on how youth are taking action for groundwater and sanitation. Let me just briefly explain the format of today's webinar before we begin. We will first have presentations from each of our three wonderful panelists. We'll have a intermittent dialogue between the speakers, and then we'll jump right into questions at the end of the webinar. So please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be sure to get to as many as we can. With that in mind, I would like to turn the floor over to our moderator, Renee Martin-Nagel, who is the president and CEO of A Ripple Effect and also the IWRA treasurer. Renee.
Hi, good morning, and thank you very much, Lindsay. This is a very interesting topic. I think a lot of people don't think about the connection between toilets and groundwater, but if people are using open defecation, then when it rains, the fecal chloroform goes into the groundwater, and so it can contaminate drinking water. So it's a huge problem in many places in the world. Up to 1 billion people are estimated to practice open defecation. And so we thought that this topic would be very interesting in honor of World Toilet Day to discuss. And we have with us some groundwater experts and some human rights experts as well. So Michael Campana is going to lead us off. Michael is very well known in groundwater circles, and you're very active as well. So Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, everybody seeing that? I hope. Okay, anyway. I'm going to be focusing mainly on two places where I've done some work related to the topic, Panama on Honduras. And you won't see a picture of a latrine or a toilet in this, and you're probably going to wonder, well, what's the story here? And the story is what I'm concerned with is what comes out of the toilets and latrines and how it relates to wells and things like that. And if I could get this thing going, let's see. Okay. One thing you'll notice is that I have a lot of URLs in any PowerPoint I have. Don't try to copy these down. As Lindsay said, you're going to have access to these within a week or so, and I'll send a PDF out and you'll be able to access all the stuff. So don't try to copy this down. And in Honduras, I'm going to talk about working with students, gringo students, and in Panama, the Embra Indians, and had some interesting sessions there. Again, a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goals, and of course, the SDG 6 deals with sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. So it's very relevant to what I'm talking about today. This is a young woman, a young mother in, I believe it's Malawi, and she's doing the heavy work there with 45 pounds of water on her head, and she's smiling. And why is she smiling? Because she has a job. And what I'm wearing today, you probably didn't see it, but it's my Got Water t-shirt. On the front, it says Got Water, and on the back, this is what it says. They're looking for a water carrier. You must be able to carry water on your head, You've got to work up to 8 hours a day. The wages are zero, and actually only women and girls need to apply because we're not interested in disrupting the life of the men. So I want to thank Ray Newmeyer, who's a colleague of mine, a driller and an engineering physicist. That's a great combination, and he lives in the San Luis Valley of Colorado. So I want to talk about Honduras. Honduras is a country, it's in Central America. It's the light-colored thing showing there above Nicaragua and next to El Salvador and Guatemala, and the Caribbean Sea is just to the north. And Honduras has about 9 million people, and I've been working there with water for 20 plus years. And I used to take students from when I was at the University of New Mexico. We took students down there to work on water projects. And what we did there is we didn't build the water projects. We trained the people, the villagers, how to create or how to construct them and would monitor them and things like that. And we worked in a place called the Sierra de Amoa, which are mountains up in the northwest section there. I don't know if you can see this dot right up in here. And we worked in villages up there that had maybe a couple hundred houses. And it was actually my foundation that supported it. And so we donated money and time and things like that. And what the systems that we designed were spring-fed systems. So you're saying, well, wait a minute, I want to know about groundwater. Well, the springs were fed by groundwater. So we had to make sure that when we built these things, and this is a picture of Ricardo Alvarado, who is the mayor of the Municipio de Amoa. That was the municipio in Honduras is equivalent to a county in the United States. And Ricardo was very supportive of our work. He didn't contribute money. They didn't have much money, but they contributed a lot of assistance, particularly driving around in their four-wheel vehicles and stuff. And he's giving me this is where I was ambushed at a hotel in San Pedro Sula, which is the financial capital of Honduras. And he gave me a little reward thing here and brought the film crew in tow and all that. So that's my moment. And I actually got to speak Spanish on Honduran TV. A disaster. This is one of the things, these are one of the tanks that we build. These are 5,000 gallon US gallon tanks. That concrete thing on the top, that's a chlorinator. All these things have chlorinators, okay? So they get rid of pathogenic organisms. And the source area for this is up above it in the mountains. And so we ensure that when we locate a water tank, that there's no source of contamination. And again, the contamination in this area is fecal material, and it's not just from humans, but it's from the cattle who live up above the tank here. So we're very careful to avoid places where we know the water is going to be contaminated. And we drill this, no pun intended, into the locals and say, look, you're going to have to isolate an area and not have cattle in that area, or no latrines or toilets or anything like that. And they're actually very good about this. In fact, some of them ask about that. So, like say, hey, are we concerned? And I said, you bet you're concerned about toilets and cattle and everything. And one of the things I love there is whenever the water system is finished, I'm not a big person for meetings and things like this. But I love, because the children usually put on a morality play of some sort. And if in the background it said, el agua es vida, water is life. And the young woman here is trying to get her husband, the guy with the hat, to quit playing cards and smoking and drinking beer and provide money to support the family that they have. And what you don't see is that at the end, the gentleman kind of laugh her off and tell her to go away. And what happens is the Grim Reaper comes in and drags both the guys off to, well, you can imagine he went to hell or something. And they do stuff like this, and it's just kind of amazing. This is another place, and this is what the area looks like. This is a village called Los Mejias, and we worked in this village. We built this is a dam that's about half done. The height of that dam is about chest high. It's about 5 feet or something like that. And there's a reservoir, we'll have a reservoir behind that, and then we'll feed that reservoir into the water tank and then chlorinate it, and then we pipe it out to the houses, or not pipe, it's all gravity flow. And again, the area above this dam, we survey this and we check with the people, do you run any cattle up here? Do you have any sheep or anything like that? And I said, we tell them you can't use this for that purpose now. And sometimes that involves getting an easement from someone, the land, not to have cattle running there, because we tell them you're going to get sick. Your children are going to get sick if that material gets in the water. These are a couple of Campesinos there. The young man with the T-shirt on, with his hand on the pipe, is my friend, not Rolando, Alex Del Cid Vasquez, and he's one of the designers. And these are the pipes, with both metal pipes and PVC, polyvinyl chloride. And so,
Michael, you have 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. Okay. There's the tank. There's the nice, see, and they had a big celebration. This was a big village. Okay. Here we are. This is the Junta de Agua. Now we're in Panama. Okay. This is the Isthmus of Panama. We were working down in the southeast corner here in the Darien province. Some of you have probably heard the name Darien, the famous Darien Gap. It's the only part of the Pan American Highway that's not completed, because the area there is rugged, as you can see. The mountains in the background are, the highest peak is maybe 1,500 meters or something like that, but that's all real thick vegetation down there. There's some villages there. The only way you can get there is walking in, which is not advised. You won't make it, or you can fly in, or you can take the freighter in. I want to point this out. These are handbooks on water well guidelines for developing countries. We have them published in Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, English, Swahili, French, Spanish. We were working on Arabic when we ran out of money, but these things are great. That URL will take you there where you can download PDFs. A friend of mine contributed these, and there's information in here about contamination and latrines and stuff. It's a wonderful little booklet. Here we are in Panama. This is my friend Lauren Green in the white hat, and he's teaching these young men how to drill wells. That's an actual drilling rig there. It's called the LS100. It used to cost about $5,000, and you could FedEx it anywhere in the world for $1,000. Now, that was a number of years ago. It's probably double that by now. But
Michael, can I ask you to start to wrap up, please?
Okay. And here we are drilling wells, completing the wells. That well is completed. We've cemented it. So contamination was going to be limited. And one of the things that we investigated is where are your latrines, where are your toilets? And we placed this to avoid it. And we drilled it into their heads, no pun intended, about how to do this properly. And so we trust them. And they're still using that drilling rig after all these years. Now, these things I put there, and again, you can use URLs. And one thing bad about World Toilet Day is there are a lot of jokes about it. And I did not put this up here. This is the title of the article, Crapping on the Gates Toilet. And I would encourage all of you to those of you interested in this, to read that. And anyway, so if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. I love that. And this is the ceramic thing on my wall as I look up here. The water walk, you've got a woman with a baby on her back and 45 pounds on her head. So thank you very much, and glad to be here.
Thank you, Michael. We're now going to turn to Amanda, who is very much involved in the human right to water, and she's going to discuss that in the context of what we are talking about today.
Right. Well, I've got my slides going. Hello, nice to see you all today. Well, I'm going to give a slightly different perspective. I'm going to look at the link between sanitation systems, groundwater, and human rights. I've now got a problem in that it's not changing. Hold on. There you go. Yeah, so there we are. First of all, our organization has a a vision to create a world where all people realize the human rights to water and sanitation. And in our mission, we use, collect and share expert knowledge on how the human rights to water and sanitation should be integrated into law, policy and practice. And our goal is to realize safe and sustainable access to water and sanitation for all, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized. Oh, it's changing on me. And that picture, I think, sort of says it all, people looking for toilets. I like that little icon. So connecting sanitation and groundwater, I just thought I'd give a little bit of background first, because there are 3.6 billion people in the world today without quality toilets. That means that they don't have a toilet that is either in the house or close to the house that has some kind of system for processing the effluent. And about 800 children die every day from diarrhea related to contaminated water. This is globally, of course. And a lot of it is connected with the way that sanitation is leaking into our groundwater systems, because human waste spreads to rivers, lakes, and through the soil. And if it's deposited on the ground, it'll find its way into the water systems. And this little picture is a UN Water World Toilet Day picture that they're throwing around all over social media at the moment. There's some really cool little videos that go with that. But it shows nicely how you have a toilet sitting on the ground, but actually if you don't know where the effluent is going, it should be going into a system that cleans it and processes it and turns it into clean water, and then you can remove the contaminants. But if it doesn't, it goes straight down into the groundwater. And then you have your drinking well a little bit down the hill where the water is extracted, and hence you have a problem with your drinking water and people get sick. And this is the biggest problem in our poorest and marginalized communities all over the world. It's not restricted to one region, it's everywhere, especially in developing countries. So our groundwater is the source of fresh water for drinking. More than half of the world accesses their drinking water source from groundwater. That's across the board. And that groundwater is used for everything, for drinking, for using our toilets, but mostly for big uses such as agriculture and industry. And that has its other problems in terms of over-extraction, which means there isn't enough water and clean water for us to drink. And importantly, and something that's often not given any attention at all, is that our ecosystems need enough water to function in a healthy manner. So there's a global sanitation crisis. What do we mean by safe toilets? And by that, in UN or United Nations water speak, it's termed safely managed. So in other words, it's not shared with lots of other people, that the waste is safely treated either on site in a closed system, or removed and treated somewhere else, or connected to a sewage pipe system that goes to a plant and is processed. 500 million people in the world have no toilet whatsoever. That means that they practice what's called open defecation. That means that they go into a field or somewhere where they can find some privacy, and they have to leave it on the ground. And of course, that finds its way into our groundwater systems. So nearly half of the world are not connected to safely managed sewage systems. So it's a really big problem. We're running out of clean water. We're running out of water for drinking. And then on top of that, we're contaminating it because we don't look after the way that we manage our effluents. So looking at the human rights, and we have rights to water, rights to sanitation, and rights to a healthy environment. All the human rights are equally important. And I've taken a quote here from General Comment number 15, which is the original document that referred to the right to water. And it talks about water being a limited natural resource and a public good, which is fundamental for life and health. So the human right to water is indispensable for leading a life in human dignity. And it's a prerequisite for the realization of other human rights. More recently, we've had a recognition of the human rights to a healthy environment, and the framework principles there talk about states ensuring a safe, clean, healthy and sustainable environment in order to respect, protect and fulfill human rights. So water, therefore, needs to be safe. It needs to be, this again is another quote from General Comment 15, it needs to be free from microorganisms, chemical substances and radiological hazards that constitute a threat to a person's health. It's not really difficult to understand that. If we don't look after our environmental sources of water, we're not going to be able to find sufficient water for drinking for future generations. And so in green, we have the framework principles from the right to a healthy environment, where it talks about states respecting, protecting and fulfilling human rights again. And I think here that groundwater is the link between what the water we need to drink and the healthy environment, because if we don't look after our groundwater, which is the source of most of our drinking water, then we don't have a sustainable system. And just one more extract here, just to highlight the sanitation aspects, because sanitation must be safe to use and it must effectively prevent human, animal and insect contact with human excreta. That is recognized in SDG 6.2. It's referred to, but not explicitly, in the original right to water. And the right to sanitation has since been identified as a separate human right. That also means safety and protection of the health of users in the community. And it aligns very nicely with the right to a healthy environment in terms of the sustainability angle. So we need to protect our healthy environment in order to protect our health. The two are inextricably linked. So in this last wrap-up slide, I suppose what I wanted to bring to your attention is that groundwater is invisible. We can't see it. It's underground by definition, but it actually is the source of the majority of our drinking water. And we are visibly polluting it. We don't care for it because we don't understand it. We don't measure it. There isn't enough data systems in place to monitor it. And what happens is that the groundwater that used to be there is becoming less and less. The quality of that water is becoming lower and lower. And priority is being given to commercial uses and agricultural uses at the expense of water for human needs in terms of drinking water and personal use. And so that what's happening is that toilet waste and other effluents and wastes are polluting our groundwaters in a way that's very difficult to recover from. And this dead fish that's sitting in a puddle of water that's come from the groundwater, because actually our springs come from groundwater and our rivers are replenished from groundwater. And the animals and the ecosystem that lives in those rivers is a reflection of the health of the river. And when you see dead animals, dead insects, or lack of animals and plants in that water, then you know that there is contamination. And the environment tells us the story, the invisible story, that the groundwater is no longer healthy and good for us to drink. And so I just want to help you to think a little bit about the importance of linking a healthy environment, looking after our groundwater, and the sustainability of the human race for our drinking water. So thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Perfect timing. Michelle, you're going to talk to us about, as a representative of your generation, about the actions that the youth are taking to protect groundwater from pollution through open defecation on World Toilet Day. So I'll just turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Renee. So I'll start sharing the screen, and today I am wearing the hat of youth activist. So I'm not a groundwater professional today. So just to make the difference between my two statuses. Okay, so the title of my presentation is "We're not sitting around." So, and I mean by it that we as youth, like we are fighting most of the time to get a seat on the table of the main discussions happening locally or internationally. So it's not obvious that we are heard, but we are doing like a huge effort to be heard. And yeah, so that's what I will be mainly talking about today. But first, I will start by talking quickly about the importance of groundwater. So that's mainly a slide that I adapt for different presentations. So we all know that groundwater accounts for almost 99% of all liquid freshwater on Earth. And if we look at the withdrawals of groundwater, so they account for around 25% of all human freshwater withdrawals, and this figure is expected to increase by 2% every year increased in fact by about 2% every year over the past 2 decades. And groundwater also sustains many ecosystems, so it's not only useful for us as humans, but it's also very important for many groundwater dependent ecosystems. So that's why the groundwater quality degradation will also be a very important topic for the coming generations, and not only for today's topics. So that's why UNESCO initiated the Groundwater Use Network, having a main focus on groundwater, and also as use being a focus group for UNESCO. So this network was launched during the World Water Forum in Dakar a few months ago. And now it has more than 900 members from 111 countries, with one overarching target, which is enhancing the engagement of youth in addressing water security issues. And we have many specific objectives, starting by creating a youth network of groundwater ambassadors of change, empowering young groundwater professionals and supporting their development by involving them in decision-making processes and promoting their participation in international groundwater activities. So that's what I was mentioning at the beginning of my talk. And also we aim to integrate the youth perspective in the preparation of UNESCO IFP's groundwater activities and events. So our General Assembly is composed of 900 members, as I previously mentioned, and we had like our first meeting a few months ago also. And we have a steering committee with 5 subcommittees. So we have Partnership Committee, Outreach Committee, Project Coordination Committee, Communication Committee, and Scientific Committee. And I'm presenting this to show that we have a focus on groundwater quality under the Scientific Committee, and more specifically under the Groundwater Monitoring Working Group, which is working closely on developing and collecting feedback from youth from all over the world on groundwater monitoring and groundwater quality aspects. And I will be sharing some results of this forum in a few seconds. And just to give like an idea about our age distribution, so we are mainly between 18 and 35, with the largest group between 21 and 35. So we're really young and we're really motivated to make a change in the groundwater sector. In terms of gender, we're also balanced, and in terms of regional distribution, so Africa is one of the largest areas where we have my members from, then Asia Pacific and our Arab states region also, and then from Europe and North America we have a lower representation. Now, coming back to our topic, so SDG Target 6.2 is the world's promise to ensure safe toilets for all by 2030. And this means that everyone should have access to a toilet connected to a sanitation system that effectively removes and treats human waste. And if we look at our trend so far, so we're off track, obviously. So if we continue by the same trend, only 67% of the world population will have access to safely managed sanitation by 2030, although our promise was to leave no one behind. So if we want to leave no one behind in reality, we need to make an effort which is doubled by 4 times in order to reach the 100% value. And This current situation, so if we can call it crisis, it led to serious impacts on public health, education, economic productivity, environmental integrity, and gender equality also. And here I also recall the figure mentioned by Amanda earlier regarding the children deaths. So looking at the geographical distribution of treated versus untreated wastewater discharged into water bodies, which also includes groundwater bodies. So if we look at the world map, so we can clearly see a north-south inequality in this regard. And also if we look at Europe, we see an east-west inequality in this regard. So this poses a lot of questions on a lot of things that I won't mention because some of them are very political, some of them are also related to international organizations' work, and some of them are also related to the histories, to the past of the relations between those regions. So I skip this point for now. And looking at groundwater vulnerability, so that's something that we are advocating for as youth. So to take into account groundwater vulnerability while doing management plans for the different countries, especially in terms of urban planning. So it's very easy to develop groundwater vulnerability maps. There are a lot of methods, and this one, for example, is for Africa, but it can be also done for different countries on local scales. Plotting those with pollution sources and pollution targets is a very powerful tool to be able to do better decisions in terms of urban planning. Our colleagues also on the Groundwater Use Network from Africa, they submitted an abstract for the 5th South African Development Community Groundwater Conference, which is taking place those days. And so they did a detailed review on the situation in Africa in terms of groundwater vulnerability and groundwater quality. And they are sharing there now some main recommendations related to improving groundwater education in Africa, raising awareness on the vulnerability of this invisible resource, and also promoting WASH initiatives in the region. Coming back to the forms that I mentioned earlier, that was launched by Groundwater Monitoring Working Group of the Groundwater Use Network. So we discovered while analyzing the results of this form that 76% of the respondents, they mentioned groundwater contamination as one of the 2 most important groundwater-related issues in their countries. So this shows a high level of awareness for the youth regarding this problem, the groundwater contamination problem. So that was something promising for us, like to see that at least youth are aware, the decision makers aren't. And you can still access this form. So if you want to give us your feedback, so we are aiming to fill the whole world map. So we have a lot of gaps so far, but we are aiming to have a better coverage. And also regarding groundwater guidelines, so a lot of countries still do not have any groundwater monitoring guideline, not only for quality, but also for groundwater levels and other very important parameters in order to understand the system. In terms of youth involvement also, so we wanted to know if youth are okay with their level of involvement in terms of groundwater discussions in their countries. So we can clearly see that the majority are partially to not satisfied by their level of involvement in groundwater related discussions on the national level. And their main recommendations that were also that were given by youth who participated in this campaign was also once again related to education and training, modernizing groundwater monitoring, involving all stakeholders, so as we saw, and applying citizen science in groundwater monitoring.
Michelle, you have 2 more minutes.
Yeah, so I guess I'm done. And finally, I'm concluding with this slide where I'm showing our time frame since our beginning. So we started during the World Water Forum, and now we're at on the 19th of November, so we're 17th, but we're celebrating the World Water Toilet, the World Toilet Day, sorry. And finally, we will have the Groundwater Summit in a few days, in 2-3 weeks, where we will be organizing the Groundwater Use Forum. So this will be a very important, it will be mainly our main milestone of the year as Groundwater Use Network. We will be having a keynote speech about groundwater education. So since we noticed that groundwater education is like the most important topic that was repeated in a lot of consultations that we did also with youth around the world. So that's why we'll be having Prof. John Cherry from the Groundwater Project talking about groundwater education. And that will be very important also to highlight the importance of groundwater, not only for the local communities or for the people, but also for the decision makers, since a lot of ministers and head of states will be attending this conference. And there will be also an intergenerational panel where a lot of topics will be discussed. So finally, I close my speech with the numbers also mentioned earlier by Amanda. So 0.5 billion people still relieve themselves through open defecation, and 3.6 billion are not connected to safely managed sanitation systems. So that's already 50% of the global population. And finally, if we want to advocate on this topic, so we have to keep the message simple, because we notice that a lot of decision policymakers are not very aware on the importance of water issues. So if we complicate our message, they will simply like forget it or don't take or won't take it into account. So we will keep it very simple, and we will say that safe sanitation protects groundwater, and 50% of the world's population drinks groundwater. So we have 50% chance to be drinking contaminated groundwater, and that will be our message for the decision makers. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting. And I'm impressed with everything that your group has accomplished in a very short period of time. Really, kudos. I'm going to pose at least one question to the group before we turn it over to the Q&A. And Michelle, you can stop sharing your screen now if you don't mind. As we have heard, the groundwater contamination is a huge issue. It affects many millions of people. Where do you think the solutions lie? Do you think it's at sort of the UN global level, at the national level, at the local level? Is it a combination of all three? How do you think we should tackle this problem? Mandy, you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah, I wasn't sure who you were asking. Yeah.
Anybody.
Yeah, so clearly you need to work at all levels, but I think the area that's most forgotten about is the community level, because actually that's where the work is done and where people know the environment where they live. So I think that there needs to be a flow of information both ways, from the community to the government, but there needs to be stronger policies, stronger laws and policies that are really putting some more emphasis onto the protection of groundwater, onto the monitoring of data and collection of data for groundwater, and also enabling those communities to be able to put in action some of the solutions that need to be found with government support, because it's not going to, there isn't enough money at the moment in the world to build everybody a sewage treatment plant. It needs to come from the local solutions as well. So very much a human rights-based approach of non-discrimination, participation and inclusion, data transparency and accountability. And I think that's, it's not easy. That's why it hasn't been done.
I'd agree with that. My excuse me, limited experience, I would say that the community groups, you need a couple people who are leaders and mobilize, and then you go to the government officials with supposedly the people with the money. But I've been amazed, as I said, the two projects I described. There've been other ones at how intelligent the locals are. They don't know the words and everything, but you know, it's like that guy who said, well, we can't drill a well here because there was a latrine there a few years ago. and it's like, gee whiz. So I would agree. I think the local people, I've been amazed at how wise they are in certain areas. Been a real eye opener.
Michelle, what are your thoughts?
Same here. So I had like a personal experience with local people in Kenya. So local knowledge was very, very very useful for me. But also when we take this local knowledge and we get some like conclusions or results, recommendations, etc., and we take them to the higher level, to the governmental level. So that's where our problems start, to be honest. So because a lot of officials, as I mentioned, like aren't aware of the seriousness of the problem when we start talking about water. And if we talk about groundwater, then it's even more complicated because it's unseen. So we need a lot of effort in terms of raising awareness for starting by, I guess, officials and high-level decision makers, because the local communities, they live nearby their sources, and they know and they understand well their sources of water and the risks that are related to water quality degradation. But when we go into higher levels, then that's where like privileged people live. So they can simply like buy clean water from any private source, but local people who can't afford it. So that's a very, very, very like very serious problem for inequality, and you can see it like around the world, mostly in several countries of the world.
And one of the big issues, I guess, is education and raising awareness. And so do you have any examples of how that has been accomplished successfully to raise awareness of these issues and then that leading to solutions? Michael, you've done some work.
Yeah, yes, I'm going to mention something that I can't back up, but when I was taking my students down to Honduras in the early 2000s, we had a number of students who were pretty good in Spanish, and one of my graduate students developed a board game for children, and it was in Spanish, and it was remarkable. And if you're going to ask me, what about it? When I moved from Albuquerque here to Corvallis, somewhere along the line, it disappeared, and I can't find it. But that's something that, I mean, that as I think all of you know, and I think Michael just mentioned, I mean, that the children are really hungry for information because they know something's wrong, but people kind of diss them because they're children. But if you approach them in the right way, now maybe a board game in the year 2022 doesn't wash, no pun intended, but it was a way. And so yeah, I would encourage people to well, maybe they can find the board game between here and Albuquerque, but anyway, it's gone. But yeah, that was a great approach. You got a master's degree for it.
Wow. One example I can perhaps share with you is the work I'm doing with the World Water Quality Alliance on citizen science, and we're sharing. It's almost an educational tool, but it's for actually monitoring the quality of water. It's not groundwater per se; it's for rivers more than groundwater, but they're all connected. And it uses a very simple system for identifying the bugs that live in the water, and then you calculate how many there are of each kind. You just collect them in a net and put them in a plastic bucket, and then you identify them with this dichotomous key that says, has it got legs, has it got wings, has it if it has got wings, what kind of wings are there? And you identify the bugs, and of course the more sensitive bugs live in cleaner water. And there's an app, I'll share it with you in the chat, called Mejias, and you can use it. Anybody can use it, it's free. You don't need to speak the language, all you need is pictures. You identify the bugs in your bit of the river and where you are, and you load this through the app onto Google Maps, and then you get a grade of quality for your river. And we're trying to promote this through our membership at the moment, and it's great in schools, in educational facilities, anyone who's interested in learning about the environment, because what it does is it highlights the importance of the ecosystem for water quality. And if the bugs can't live there, then it's not good for drinking. I mean, it's not supposed to be used to determine whether the water is good enough quality to drink. It's for educating people that the water might be polluted. And actually, it's great for identifying potential pollution that might be happening upriver, or measuring different parts of the river to see where there is a problem with pollution. And you can use that as information with your local council as feedback. But it's incredibly important to get people involved. And this whole social engagement aspect of citizen science, I think, is the future for monitoring water quality. And so we're really trying to roll this out now. And I think it's something that might be something people would like to just have a go at, have a look at their website. I'll pop it in the chat, and maybe people can have a look at the website for that. I'm not selling anything, it's not mine. I'm just facilitating it for people who are interested. So it's been well studied in South Africa, and the government there has been very supportive. And so they've actually done a lot of work with citizen science, not just with this particular app, but it's an example of education being a way of really helping to bring awareness and knowledge and helping people to get involved.
That's a wonderful suggestion. Thank you. And thanks for popping the link into the chat. I think we'll turn to the Q&A now, and we won't have time to get to all of them. So apologies to people whose questions we won't be posing, but we will try to respond to each of the questions separately. And I think, Lindsay, you'll describe how that happens. One easy question, I think, is, and Michael, I think you may be able to answer this. What is a safe distance between a latrine and the source of drinking water? You're on mute. You know, we all go on mute to be polite, and then we forget that we're on mute.
Then we forget we're on mute. That's a very good question. I would say something like a rule of thumb might be 100 meters or so, but I hesitate to give a rule of thumb because it varies depending upon, you know, what kind of contaminant you're dealing with, and the construction of the well, et cetera. In fact, I just sent around the URL for those publications about water supply wells, those PDFs, and that information is contained in there. So I would encourage people to look at that, but that's a very good question. So
and another question is, are there any examples of chemicals that can be used to clean the groundwater after it's become contaminated? Does anyone have an answer for that one? Michael, I think
it depends upon what you're trying to clean it of. Again, that I hate to give a rule of thumb. I'm a big fan of I don't want to say chlorine, that's a poisonous gas, but the forms of you know, that you put in a chlorinator, the tablets and things like that, that will take care of pathogenic organisms, but it won't take care of if you're dealing with PFAs or some other godforsaken contaminant. I don't think there is a solution for those things yet, but you may not find too many of those in developing countries, but certainly pathogenic organisms are the real, can be a real danger.
Go ahead.
So I have an answer to that too. And I think that in a lot of areas, well, so if you're just talking about human and animal contamination, then chlorine is a great solution. But there are big parts of the world where the contamination is heavy metals, or could be something that you can't see or smell and you don't know. And that is a big problem. And so it's a case of educating people about what's in their water and what type of filtration or system could be used to take those contaminants out. And it's going to be a bigger and bigger problem as more and more water gets contaminated. We've always assumed it was clean. That's what we've done for generations. It's no longer true. So.
Yeah, and those of us who work in groundwater consistently are aware of this, but many people don't know that it's very difficult to remediate groundwater because the contaminants cling to the surfaces of the rock, and it's really hard to release them. Michelle, there's a question here for you. How are the existing guidelines related to groundwater and sanitation in certain countries? And is there a way to expand the number of countries that will use those guidelines? And are the guidelines being, if there are guidelines, are they being updated?
The report issued by IWRA, International Groundwater Resource Assessment Center, and they covered most of the countries. So they sent like letters to the different ministries of water and governments, and some of them did not respond even to this survey. So they don't have an answer if the monitoring guideline exists or not. And in other countries, there is like a monitoring guideline. So how to increase it? First of all, like it's also by raising awareness on the importance of having a monitoring guideline. So that's the first step. And the second step is to have empowered people working in the public authorities of those countries, because it's a public decision. And also we can advocate, like youth can be like a pressure group advocating and requesting to have such a decision taken in their countries. So that's mainly the way for it.
Amanda?
Yeah, I think it's a bigger problem than that in terms of standards, because even the human right to sanitation isn't recognized in very many countries, and it's a human right. And that has guidelines on maintaining standards of how you manage your toilet and sewage systems. The SDG 6.2 has very good guidelines in terms of general safety for water, for sanitation and water systems. And I think that is helping, because countries are having to at least try and monitor it to test whether they've realized the targets. But actually there's a huge lack of understanding, lack of resources, and lack of data for monitoring groundwater. So until you have that information, very difficult to do very much about it.
Yeah. It is difficult to figure out what those guidelines will be. And someone asked a question in the chat, actually. So who should be in charge of organizing? Should it be the scientists, or should it be management consultants, or should it be an interdisciplinary approach? And I'd like your views on that. What's the best way to approach these issues?
I would say an interdisciplinary approach. I mean, you want more than scientists and engineers. You want sociologists, political scientists, public administration people. So, and always community folks, stakeholders.
And actually everybody in any position like that has a duty to protect and respect human rights. So first of all, the government should have a duty to do that, and then it should be going through the different levels at local government level, through the local water authorities, water sanitation, treatment bodies, and through ourselves as either academics or NGOs or development organizations. We all have a responsibility to try and make things work. And so I agree with Michael, it's absolutely multidisciplinary, but I don't think a lot of people realize that they do have that duty. And actually, it needs to be written in law and policy to make sure it's happening on a sustainable basis.
I have just a brief story that's kind of interesting, but I never thought about water rights. In the US, it's a big deal, but I remember going to Honduras and we were working on a project there, and I asked the guy in charge of the project, I said, well, what about the people downstream? I mean, don't they have a right to this, in my broken Spanish? And he looked at me and he said, water right. He goes, mala suerte, which means tough luck. That's their water right. So, but we got that straightened out. So that's one thing you have to be aware of, that I wasn't until I started asking around. So
Yeah, as a water lawyer, I'm aware
Yeah.
that we have this principle of equitable and reasonable use, but it's sometimes, yeah, sometimes it doesn't work so well in practice. Works
Yeah.
better in theory. Yeah. Michelle, there was a question for you. Can you explain why, do you have an explanation for why there is so little representation from India in your group?
India, in fact, it's the largest number of like the largest number of members are from India in our groundwater use network, and I showed that in one of the slides.
Okay.
So it's mainly India, then Nigeria and Egypt. Those are the top three represented countries in our network.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. I think that any concluding remarks from anybody? Any concluding statements before I turn this back over to Lindsay to round us out?
I just want to say, for those of you in sub-Saharan Africa, the fellow who came up with those water supply guidelines, Steve Schneider, who's a friend of mine up here, he often travels to conferences in that part of the world. And I don't know if he still does it, but he used to bring 2 suitcases full of 5 by 7 inch copies of those books with wire bound and also paper, permanent paper, kind of glossy paper with beautiful figures. And if you ever run into him at a conference, run up to him and tell him I sent you, and can I have some of those things? Because the customs people know him, and they know that these suitcases are going to be empty in about 10 minutes when he goes to the conference. So they always try to grab some. That just a little hint there, but they're great.
Well, it's nice that his publication is so much in demand too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks to all of our panelists. This has been fascinating. I learned a lot. I'm sure their audience did too. And Lindsay, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out.
Thanks, Vinay. And thank you all for joining us today. We had about 130 participants, so really great turnout. Again, a big thank you to each of our panelists, Michael, Amanda, Michelle, and our moderator, Renee. Thank you all for being here today. For the audience, I hope you guys found this discussion interesting. If you'd like to continue this discussion, feel free to post on our LinkedIn page with IWRA. For those who are asking for the slides, the presentations, we will post them on the IWRA website. You can visit iwra.org/webinars. You'll find access to the recording of this webinar and the presentations. And we have some links being put in the chat right now that you can access those. And yeah, behalf of the whole IWRA office, we thank you for attending. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.